This programme was produced at and first aired on MPR, Manawatu People's Radio, with support from New Zealand On Air. Ka pai Irarangi Tamotu, MPR.
Kia ora and welcome to Reserved Recommendations. This is a show about great trash, difficult art, and our complicated relationships with art and culture. My name's Hugh, I'm the host of the show, and I'd like to take this opportunity to put in a very mild content warning for the show as a whole. Sometimes our recommendations on this show are reserved just because the thing that we're discussing is in some way not good, but sometimes there are aspects of the art or artist that may be confronting for some people. Check the episode descriptions for more information, and do be aware of your listening environment. Kia ora and welcome to another episode of Reserved Recommendations. This is a radio show and podcast from Manawatu People's Radio, Te Reo Irirangi o ngā tangata o Manawatu, and this is a show where we look at difficult art and great trash, which is a term that I love. And we can maybe get into why it's a good term in the course of the episode, because I think it is a good term. It gives me very great pleasure to introduce this evening's guest, Jay Dragon. How's it going, Jay?
It's going well. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Excuse me for rudely turning away from you. I'm just going to make a couple of very, very minor audio adjustments. Someone's fiddled with the laptop that I'm using to receive you, and as a consequence, you were distorting slightly until I fiddled with it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did that. I climbed into the laptop and mucked around in there when you weren't looking.
I've got to stop getting these guests who will teleport into the studio and mess with the laptop in advance. It's awful. Anyway, thank you very much for coming on, Jay. The thing that you mentioned when I hit you up to be a potential guest, and I kind of, my brain lit up and I thought, yes, I must talk to someone about this, is the movie Jupiter Ascending, which
yes,
I think is in many ways like, I don't know, it's kind of a perfect encapsulation of the idea of great trash.
Oh, absolutely. I think Jupiter Ascending is I've watched a lot of bad movies, and some of them I've truly hated watching. Like, I will never watch Food Fight again, not if someone pays me. Like, I do it if they paid me a lot. But like, I don't think I could watch Food Fight, but Jupiter Ascending is a movie that it's so awful, it's so bad, and I'll watch it over and over again.
So I said this at the start, and maybe this is a good time to get into it. I really like the idea of great trash. I got it from a YouTuber called Dan Olson, who goes by Folding Ideas. I'm sure other people have used it as well. But the idea is that you use it as an alternative to the concept of a guilty pleasure. Like, you should never feel guilty about your pleasures, but sometimes the stuff that you like is trash, and it's fine to say that this is my trash, and I really like this trash in particular, and I just acknowledge that it's trash. And the thing that I really, because I've only seen Jupiter Ascending once, but the thing that just grabbed me about it and kept me engaged all the way through is that, like, at no point does it give the sense that anything about it is a put on or a joke, or that it ever takes itself anything less than 100% seriously in the utter nonsense it's saying.
Oh, absolutely. And for our listeners, if you haven't ever heard of Jupiter Ascending before, it is a delightfully bad science fiction epic by the Wachowski Sisters, who also did, The Matrix, who did Speed Racer, who did Sense8. And it's the story of this Russian girl who discovers that she is like the genetic reincarnation of the like capitalist oligarch queen of the galaxy, and she must like claim her rightful place as queen of the galaxy, and also the three children of the former mother, who are all like run these enormous businesses where they turn human beings into like the elixir of life. So they just like en masse take a planet, fill it up with people, and then like exterminate them all in order to create like fluid to live forever and take baths in. And so she has to like save the Earth from being turned into goo, and also falls in love with Channing Tatum, who is a wolf man who was once a member of the military, but lost his title after he attacked a noble and he had his wings cut off because he's a wolf man with angel wings. And it's like truly not good. I almost got kicked out of the theater the first time I saw it because I was laughing so hard when Eddie Redmayne looks directly at the camera and goes, "I create life," and then he leans in and whispers, "And I destroy it." And it's so like scenery chewing. I started crying laughing, and someone in front of me got mad at me because they were trying to take it seriously, and I was crying too hard. But it's a really good movie. I really like it. Yeah, and I've thought a lot about it, and I really adore it.
So I mean, one of the things that I've heard said as a defense of Jupiter Ascending, and I think that, you know, I think it's a good one, is that while everything about it is incredibly silly, it's probably no sillier than, I don't know, a Marvel movie or like other movies that people kind of acknowledge are bad and maybe bad and regressive, but watch because they're fun, like, you know, the golden age of 80s Hollywood muscle men. Where everyone looks like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, only not pretty.
Absolutely.
For no practicable reason, because actual soldiers don't look like that. And like, it's not dumber than Rambo.
No, I think it's smarter than Rambo, frankly. I think the reason why I think it's a bad movie, first off, I think there's kind of the practical level where the Wachowski sisters made a 5-hour long sci-fi epic, and then they had to cut it down to an hour and a half. So I think that there are a lot of issues that occurred on the editing floor that make the movie bad. Like, it is paced miserably. Its cuts are weird. It pushes a lot of information at you very fast. I think that it's not a good movie, like, in sort of like the theatrical release, which is like the only thing available, although I want the Wachowski cut so bad. But I think that the theatrical release is not a good movie because it just doesn't, it feels like half a movie. Like, you can tell there's more there and you're not getting it. But I think that the reason why it's such a good bad movie is because it's so, like, as you said, it's full of ridiculous things, and it's aspiring to such great heights. And that's why I like it, is that I do think it fails at kind of the thing it's trying to be. Where, like, if you watch Star Wars, I grew up much younger than when the first Star Wars movies came out. Like, I was a little kid watching the prequels, and I remember a while ago I went back and I rewatched the first Star Wars movie, and I pretended I knew nothing about Star Wars, and I just watched the first Star Wars movie, and it communicates information very well. The title scroll is a little insecure, but it communicates this kind of information. It manages to make you feel like you're up to your nose in water, but it never drowns you. And Jupiter Ascending does not do that. So I think Jupiter Ascending does fail, but I think it fails so spectacularly. Like, it would be like if someone released, if someone made a super cut of if all 9 Star Wars movies were filmed like in one go, and then someone tried to cut it into one movie. Like, it won't be a good movie, but oh my God, the highs and the lows.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because I wasn't aware that it had been cut down from a much longer thing. And in that way, I almost wonder if, I mean, obviously all of the effects, and because it's, let us not forget, like a high budget, supercomputer effects, it's aiming for Marvel movie blockbuster. Obviously the effects wouldn't have been possible, but I wonder if it would almost have fared better if they'd released it in like the 70s. Like, if the context it existed in was like Alejandro Jodorowsky's just released this like 3-hour movie where at the end he tells you that the entire movie is an illusion, and it was sitting next to that, and that was the context, and people were prepared to like do 5 hours with 2 intermissions to watch this strange space royalist, anti-royalist thing, it might have been more charitably received.
I think the movie absolutely would have been so much better if it was made. Like, I feel like its failure to me comes from the fact that it was made with the expectation of being this blockbuster. That like the way I once saw someone describe it was it's like they wanted another. It's like the Wachowski sisters wanted another go at sort of the big action sci-fi blockbuster, and they did The Matrix, and they wanted to do this. They wanted to make, a lot of the subtext of The Matrix. They wanted to be much more textual about it. They wanted to make something that was a lot more, kind of what they're up to. And I don't like. I think that it would have been so much better if it wasn't kind of like if it wasn't trying to be so flashy. Like, it's so original and unique in its visuals. Like, the special effects are not generic. Like, I watched like Civil War, any Marvel movie, and it's like they're like on a field of mud, and it's like the muddy screen and like the gray characters fighting each other. If I'm lucky, Guardians of the Galaxy will show up. Like, but Jupiter Ascending is like, it's got spaceships with sails, and it's got like, there's one guy with a floating halo of beautiful ladies that like are flying around him, like, like as he's kind of like doing his thing. Or like there's a planet with like crystalline red flowers blooming everywhere. And it's just like, it's so gorgeous. And I think that like, I would have loved to see those special effects on kind of almost the Star Wars level, where it was like, oh, we got to hire someone to paint a bunch of little backgrounds in the like kind of doing that, having to do a lot of tricks to do it. Because I think that it gets, I don't want to say lazy, but like the special effects, I feel like are part of where it fails. I think you're right, because I think that like if they had to be tricky about the special effects, right? Like if they had to be reusing old Muppets or like kind of painting backgrounds or like that kind of stuff, I think that it could have been a much better movie because they would have had to been a lot trickier with it. But I think part of the reason it failed is that they kind of were like, we have this beautiful vision, let's just film all this and we'll make it work. And I kind of wish there was that challenge.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you make the point about they kind of got licensed to make it, having done The Matrix or The Matrices, I guess. Now I forgot to check. Is this before or after Speed Racer?
This is after Speed Racer. This is their last big blockbuster. They haven't tried to do another thing since. I guess they're going to do a fourth Matrix apparently, but they didn't try to do anything for a while after Jupiter Ascending.
Right. Okay. So they'd had the various matrices, and then they'd done Speed Racer, which is its own completely deranged thing. They tried this, and the comparison I was going to draw was to have you seen Jennifer's Body? Are you a horror person at all?
I actually told my friend I was going on this podcast, and she said to me, she was like, oh my God, if I was there, I would be talking about Jennifer's Body.
Well, feel free to put her in touch with me. I would love to talk to someone about Jennifer's Body. The comparison I was going to draw was that I watched Jennifer's Body a long time after it came out because my wife and I, back when DVD stores were a thing, would just kind of grab things from the horror section and watch them. And I was really impressed with it. And I remembered vaguely that it had been poorly received, but not really like much about that. And then later I found out that the issue was that it had been marketed as this sort of like sexy lady monster movie when it's actually something much more subversive and uncomfortable than that. And a lot funnier than the trailer led people to expect as well. And so it like the audience it had been pitched to just completely bounced off it. And I wonder if Jupiter Ascending has a similar sort of problem in that it was clearly retooled at the executive level to try and hit this like grandiose action sci-fi thing when it is like a lot more complicated and weird.
I when I was younger, I read an essay about Jupiter Ascending. I can't remember who wrote it anymore. I was I was 16 or something. But in the essay, they talk about Jupiter Ascending being very similar to a lot of fan fiction tropes. And when you watch it, you see it, right? You've got this girl who's a very self-insert girl. Like, she's not really a character. She is just like, oh, like, this is a girl with a hard life, And then all these crazy things happen to her, and she meets this beautiful guy who's like destined to fall in love with her, and like suddenly like her body and her genetics are super important, and like she kind of goes up and down the galaxy, and it has a lot in common with like self-insert fan fiction, or like even like stories that are kind of different genres that are written to appeal to girls. Like, it reminds me a bit of Tangled, I would say, like just in terms of being like the princess in the tower.
I was going to say Twilight, the awkward, uncomfortable girl who suddenly, for no obvious reason, attracts the attention of the immortal and gorgeous vampire who absolutely must be her devoted servant.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there is even like something to be said about like Eddie Redmayne as this immortal, beautiful, evil vampire who wants her versus like Channing Tatum, who is this like handsome wolf man. Like, it's very self-insert. And I think also like that, I think the reason it almost feels like when I watch it, what it feels like to me is that there is this sci-fi movie. And then someone wrote a fan fiction about that sci-fi movie. And then they were given $100 million to make their fan fiction into a movie. Like, it's like a fan fiction for a story that doesn't exist. And it's got a lot of the failing points of fan fiction to me, but I feel like it also gives it something very special because there's not really any other like there's action movies where it's like, here's the strong female protagonist, but I don't think there's a lot of action movies that feel like a story told by women, that feel like a girl's story, where it's like you've got to like, it's a plot line that tends to be relegated to girl stories in a setting that feels very fantastical and almost youthful in its sort of imagination. Like, it feels sort of like it's kind of like it's grappling with all these themes in a way that's very 14 or 15 years old to me. Like, it feels very like, like they're like, we're going to grapple with capitalism, but from a very youthful perspective. And so like from that angle, there's something really special about it. Cause it's like, like there's a lot of action movies where clearly it's about like, there's action movies that are male power fantasies, even if the characters are women. There's still stories from a corpus of men's stories. And I feel like Jupiter Ascending is like a different avenue that crossed over weirdly. And so it was never gonna be a huge hit, right? Because it could never marketing doesn't have space in sort of marketing brain to envision girls who want to be rescued by a prince and get him to shoot laser beams at her enemies. Like, like it's not quite marketing feminism worthy, but it's not like traditional enough. So like they don't have space for it, I feel like.
Yeah, I think that's a very acute analysis of it, actually, and that's another dot to join with something like Jennifer's Body. I want to pick up the thing about the politics of the movie, because of course, one of the things about like bad movies that people like is often that the politics are kind of regressive, and that's part of the badness, like when you watch a golden age of Hollywood muscle men movie, you're going to get some strange Reaganite objectivist thing. And that's kind of part of what you have to accept with the deal. So seeing something which has that like element of like fantasy for a very clearly defined audience, albeit an audience that nobody else understands outside of the movie, along with, quite progressive politics kind of ham-fistedly expressed. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, and I think the movie kind of does an interesting thing where I feel like it falls into the same like trap a lot of the Wachowskis movies fall into, which is that the sisters, they have like a coherent political worldview, and they do express it in their movies. Like The Matrix is a very leftist movie. It's a very trans movie. Like there's been, like work on that there's some really great, sort of work on analyzing its transness that I really love. And then also, I feel like even Speed Racer has that element, but at the same time, it's held back by the fact that the Wachowskis are, they're white, their politics oftentimes, like they will employ racist tropes in, I don't think Jupiter Ascending has that kind of issue, but I know Speed Racer has been criticized for its use of Orientalism. And I think that ultimately what happens is that the Wachowskis have this philosophy that can never get too sophisticated, because I feel like if it gets too sophisticated, then they have to start looking at their own place in it. And then when that happens, it kind of falls apart. So they have to walk this weird razor's edge where it's we must critique capitalism and we must do so strongly, but we can't actually capitalism. We are going to make an entire movie about how capitalism turns human bodies into a resource to be exploited in order to preserve the lives of the rich. But the fault of that is on the few individual rich people, and the protagonist, who is unwittingly and without her awareness become one of these rich people, she must be a good rich person and dismantle a portion of the system to protect Earth without actually tearing apart the whole thing. It's very it's like we must critique it, but we can't go so far as to approach it systematically, right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair critique. I think also that now I'm limited to those of their movies that I've seen. I haven't actually seen Speed Racer. I just know it by kind of insane visuals going past and reputation. And I haven't seen any of Sense8. But my vibe of the Wachowskis is that they're very in love with action cinema in particular. And that also means that it's going to be very difficult for them to have any sort of nuanced discussion. It's really hard to say, for example, okay, capitalism is this big machine that grinds up human bodies into pulp in order to serve the needs of the rich, but also getting people out of capitalism is a problem where you say to someone, unlock this box with the key you will find inside the box. It's a complete worldview, and therefore getting people out of it requires a level of consciousness shift that for many people isn't feasible for a whole range of material. That's far too complicated a discussion to have, when what you want to do is the bees acknowledge me as queen, and now I have a sexy flying werewolf boyfriend, and bad people want to murder me, but the werewolf fights them with lasers. It's hard to do both of those things at once.
And I think what happens when the Wachowskis try to do that is you get the Matrix sequels, right? Which are also glorious trash, in that they are very ornate and over the top and philosophical, and also don't hold together coherently at all. And I think it is possible to make an action movie that is subtle and thoughtful and intentional. And I think Mad Max Fury Road, which is my favorite movie, bar none, is absolutely an example of just a perfectly crafted action movie that also contains a very thorough critique of capitalism that it communicates very effectively on many layers. And I think Jupiter Ascending is almost held back by the Wachowskis are interested in bodies, right? Everything they make is about bodies and machines, and the way bodies and machines interface, and the way our bodies interface with each other. And that's very clear in The Matrix, right? And it shows up in Speed Racer, and it shows up in Sense8, from my understanding. And in Jupiter Ascending, I think what it is it's there is a way to have an action movie that can examine that can examine examine a system and examine how to get at that system. But Jupiter Ascending, and it almost gets there, but it doesn't quite. There's a moment when she is trying to verify her status as queen, and she's navigating a planet-sized bureaucracy, a planet that has been entirely converted into a bureaucratic nightmare. And the computer that's supposed to be showing her around starts short-circuiting in rage because it can't handle the bureaucracy it's programmed to deal with. And that's such a funny and witty critique of the way in which systems are designed to keep marginalized people in their places. And that even someone whose job it is to navigate these systems grows frustrated because they can't the system will not allow you to proceed. But then like the fact that the movie ends with her just, like saving Earth and not dismantling the system and just living her little life on Earth, it's almost a feeling of like the end goal of revolutionary action is ultimately to make a home for yourself and to protect the ones you immediately care about. But it doesn't make space for the idea that like then you must take care of everyone else too.
Yeah, I think you could, I think you could make a point of connection there with something like the movie version of Snowpiercer, where the final conclusion is this thing that we're inside of is so toxic that we just have to blow it up, even though that means that like we'll be left without all of its infrastructure to survive, which I don't know that that's necessarily a conclusion that everyone would support. But like that is taking the premises of your movie and then moving all the way through to the logical end result of them, if you see what I mean.
For sure. Yeah, and I think like sometimes movies will be like, this thing is a metaphor for that thing, and then they won't like acknowledge that they've made that metaphorical connection. And so when you start treating it differently, it feels very off. Like if you make a movie, right, where like, as Harry Potter did, where Harry Potter is like, oh, werewolves are a metaphor for AIDS. And then you portray like werewolf serial abusers and like serial assaulters of children. It's just playing into homophobic tropes because there's this metaphor that's been made that has these horrible ramifications. Like once you draw the connection, you can't undraw it. So I feel like if you're going to say in a movie like, oh, the Abraxas dynasty is capitalism or like it's colonialism, well, then what do you do next after that? Right. How do you like, I feel like Jupiter Ascending would be a better movie even if it's like if it had just some silly Deus Ex Machina at the end, like if it was just like, and now I am queen and I will destroy capitalism across the galaxy. Like that's silly. It would be silly, but at least it would make the movie, I think, feel like it was escaping the limitations that the Wachowskis have of their own politics.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm queen, and because I am queen, I can wish capitalism out of existence is no sillier than anything else that happens.
Exactly.
So it wouldn't damage the tone because I don't feel like being silly is a thing that hurts the movie. Actually, I think.
Oh, absolutely not.
I think the silliness is kind of an asset for it. I am talking to Jay Dragon about the movie Jupiter Ascending. It is about the halfway point here on Reserved Recommendations, so we're going to take a brief break and we'll be back right after this.
Support this show and others like it by giving a donation. For more information, go to www.mpr.nz/donate.
And we're back. You're listening to Reserved Recommendations on Manawatu People's Radio, Te Reo Irarangi o ngā tangata o Manawatu. This is a show about great trash and complicated art, and we are talking today about the movie Jupiter Ascending. Crikey, losing control of my voice. And I'm talking to Jay Dragon. Welcome back. So before we had the break, we were talking about the way in which Jupiter Ascending is kind of a movie that's like let down a bit by the unwillingness of the filmmakers to kind of have the courage of their convictions in terms of like what they set up as the initial kind of problem in the world that needs to be solved. One of the things that makes me love bad movies is when there's an alternative movie that only exists in my head that the filmmaker thought that they were making. And my favorite example of this is Zardoz. Have you ever seen Zardoz?
Oh, I have not seen it all the way through. I did watch a lot of chunks of the MST Mystery Science Theater.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Of it, but yeah.
No, I mean, Zardoz is very long and a lot of it is quite boring. So fair enough. But the thing that I find like catnip about Zardoz is that at no point can I shake the feeling that John Borman thought that he had the secret key to unlock human consciousness, and that he had made this movie that was just going to like pop people's heads open like a Fabergé egg, and like he was going to change the world. And that non-existent movie that exists kind of in my head in parallel with the real kind of boring movie is just is amazing to me. This is a long way to coming around to, like, do you have something like that with Jupiter? Like, do you have an alternative version of the movie that you kind of wish they'd made?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I watched it recently with my mom, and the whole time I was, like, imagining what it could be, because it does so much. But I wonder what it's like to be one of the Wachowski sisters, because when you release The Matrix and you revolutionize filmmaking, right? Like, The Matrix changed the game on, like, every single level. Like, it changed what action movies could be. It changed what, like, cinematography could be. It changed, like, it changed, like, everything. And I wonder what it must feel like to make movies after that, right? Like, you've made this thing that blew everyone's brains open. And I can't imagine what it'd be like to, at that point, be like, well, now we got to make Jupiter Ascending. Like, you can't, there's no coming back, right? There's got to be like this part of you that believes that it can be something way more than what it is. And I think that the thing is, like, the reason that I'm so captivated by Jupiter Ascending is because of what I mentioned before the break, the hypothetical director's cut, right? Like the full filmed treatise that, like, I don't think would also be a good movie, right? Like, I don't know if that would be a good movie either, because I feel like it'd be very long and rambling and spend many hours telling me about the intricacies of space politics. But, like, you know, like, I kind of feel like it'd be like, you know, like a little bit like the Phantom Menace sort of energy to it, like a movie that kind of just spends a lot of time in the wrong places. But I do want to see that too, right? Like, I do feel like there's this whole, you know what it feels like? It reminds me a lot of when you listen to a kid tell a story about a fantasy world, and the kid tells you about this elaborate thing, and you can see where there's even more they're not telling you. Like, you can see where all the rocks are, and you know if you picked up a rock, you could find a bunch more lore down there. And you don't really want to, because, like, bless the kid, but, like, you can't listen to them forever. But you're so, like, there's a part of you that's just like, well, what is this entire world that's been built? And that's what I think is exciting about Jupiter Ascending, is it's an entire world that is poorly explained to you. Right? Like, it's got that kind of rambling tone of when a kid tells you about their fantasy world, and they're kind of telling you about, like, oh, well, now we have to talk about the bees. And so there's bees, and there's this one guy, and he's played by Sean Bean, and he's in, you know, he's a bee man as well, like the same way like Channing Tatum is a wolf man. Like, the kind of like rambling, like, oh, and like, oh, I completely forgot about the third child of the Abraxas. Yeah, let's talk about her. Like, it just feels so, like, disjointed, but I love it for that. I love, like, this feeling like oh, I'm being thrown headfirst and into the deep end of this fantasy world.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair to the Wachowskis, we're now at a point of kind of cultural saturation with sci-fi and fantasy, where they could expect people to take a lot of things at face value. You know, you just say, right, this person is a princess but in space, and just expect people to know what that means. So I can see why they would have felt like they would have got away with it.
Oh, for sure. I think also, like, there's a difficult thing where it's a movie that's held together very much by good setting ideas, like a good setting. And the problem is that fictional settings are kind of a dime a dozen. Like, I can go to any yard sale and pick through the yard, you know, or like a library sale, and pick through the, like, 50-cent science fiction books and find settings that are just as imaginative as Jupiter Ascending, that like are consigned to the dustbin of history because they just, like it's so easy to find the wildest things if you look, like they're everywhere. And so I feel like having a lot of cool ideas for a setting, like having a cool fictional world and putting yourself in it isn't enough to tell a movie. Like a movie's also gotta have, at a certain level, it's gotta have a good plot and a good theme, and it's gotta like have good pacing, and it's gotta kind of be like, it can't just be pretty visuals and like good ideas, because those things are both commonplace. And like what is much rarer is like a good plot, right? Like a good story, a good, like a well cut. And I think that's kind of where it fails.
Yeah, I mean, you made a comparison earlier with Mad Max Fury Road, and the thing about Mad Max Fury Road is that I can explain Furiosa's journey like reasonably succinctly. So spoilers for Fury Road if you haven't watched this movie, but it's
go watch Fury Road, please. Like if we're talking about good trash, I want you to watch like a good thing also.
No, definitely go watch Fury Road. I'm just saying, firstly, I don't believe in spoilers, and secondly, like this movie's been out for a while. You've had your chance. So like you could really succinctly go, Furiosa works inside this power structure because that's what she has to do. She finds a thing that the power structure does intolerable because it's these women are being enslaved and used essentially as like brood mares. So she steals them and she tries to run to this fortified group of women that she knows about. At which
her
point,
ancestral home,
at which point she, if you want to just kind of get the metaphor down to its barest thing, discovers that violence only bears the fruit of death. Like you can't just smash the system a la Snowpiercer. You have to take the stuff in the system and repurpose it into something good. And then they go back and do that. And Mad Max is there to lend his name to the movie and help. But like
I if this was a show about just good things, I would come on here in an hour and talk about Fury Road and still have more to say afterwards. I just want you to know that I've seen this movie maybe 15 or 16 times. Like
definitely. I'm leaving an awful lot of stuff out and it's all good. But I guess my point was that I don't think that's an inaccurate description of what happens with Furiosa, and you could boil it down even further and go, when system bad, action must be taken. Action must be creative as well as destructive. Like those are the you could just get it down to that binary, and it would still sort of apply to what happens.
Yeah.
And there's
we can't hide in the past. We have to build. We can't hide in the past, and we can't destroy the present. We have to build something new for the future. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's all of this really cool stuff with the like Warboy who has a change of heart, and the like the weird side mythology about like the bullet farmers, which is as wild and strange and off the wall as anything in Jupiter Ascending. But because the central core idea is so clear, it all hangs together and makes sense. Which I guess was just a really long way of coming back to, like, that's where Jupiter Ascending kind of goes wobbly, is that there's a lot of and then.
Yeah. Like, I feel like if you're going to try to boil Jupiter Ascending's, like, philosophy down into a thing, it's that, like, that's the problem. It's the moment you try to, you start kind of realizing how, like, secretly regressive the movie is. Because it's like, any random girl could be
the queen of space.
Like the queen of space. Yeah, the queen of space. And like it's almost like I guess like maybe if you break it all down, you could say like it's the responsibility of those who have stumbled into power that they must use their power kindly and protect the people they care about. I feel like if you're going to try and boil it down, you kind of end up in this thing where it's like, if you've got someone who, like, because each of the three children of the mother that she's the reincarnation of have their own like thing about her, where the daughter tries to like be like, you and me, we should be best friends. You know, like, let's become buddies. Let me incorporate you into this system as an equal. And then the younger son tries to marry her and to seduce her and be like, you know, join me. Like, you can be my accessory, and like kind of do the man stealing the power from the woman kind of that way. And then the eldest son just wants to kill her and be done with it. And so each of them does represent a different approach that capitalism has to welcoming in the newly powerful. Like, if someone stumbles into a bunch of money, what do? You incorporate them into the system, you steal the money from them seductively, or you destroy them and you take the money violently. But ultimately, the message of the movie is like, you must resist these evils and protect the people you care about. And like, it never really gets so far as to say, like, you must destroy the system. It's like, you must, like, it's like the best thing you can do. You know what it is? It's like the best thing you can do when you have a lot of money is to live the way you were before, but with a hot werewolf angel boyfriend. Like, get yourself just enough so that you're happy and protect the people you care about, but then don't use any of the money or power or anything. Like, avoid it all. Just live your life. Which I feel like is, on one hand, like, I get what they're going for, but on the other hand, is just, it feels so, it just doesn't go far enough, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's an entirely fair critique. I just had a thought while you were saying all of that, which is, now I don't know enough about the Wachowskis as people to try and assess whether this is a good take or not. But is it secretly a Hollywood success story? Like, this upstart girl suddenly becomes the hot new thing, and all of the people who previously exist inside this celebrity culture have to decide whether they're going to like embrace her and hope that she can be an ally, or co-opt her power by making her a part of an unequal alliance, or just straight up destroy her. Because I think you could certainly claim that, you know, those are things that probably happened to the Wachowskis at some point within that system.
And looking it up, like, they're both college dropouts. They ran a house painting and construction business until they stumbled into film writing effectively. But it's and they literally have, like, you know, they have had like bad issues with people stealing power from them. I do strongly believe, like, one of my core tenets as a creator, for context, I'm a writer, is that I believe that everything you make is autobiographical. There's kind of no escape from that like, anything you make into the world in some way shows, like, tips your hand about how you're doing. And like, I feel like that's especially true for such a pair of auteurs. Like, the Wachowski sisters, they're directors and they're writers. They're like, they write their own screenplays and then direct them and like help produce them. Like, it's not like there's very few true auteurs in Hollywood, right? Like, because like most of them are collaborative projects, but like Michael Bay and the Wachowski sisters, and like those are, I feel like those are the ones who's really like, oh, your perspective and point of view blares through this movie, like, for better or worse. And I feel like you're absolutely right about, like, I'm absolutely willing to imagine that Jupiter Ascending is just as much about like two girls trying to make it in Hollywood, right? Like, two trans girls trying to figure out how to navigate Hollywood, you know, and like ultimately kind of acknowledging that it's a messed up system, but not having the power to change anything. So they just kind of protect what's theirs and they make their little things and stay out of the way.
And, you know, I wish them and their sexy flying werewolf boyfriends the absolute best. I think Michael Bay is actually a fascinating point of comparison, because you're right. He is someone who, like, I think it's important to say, like, for a long time, auteur theory was used to be like, if it's made by an auteur, it's good. And that's not actually what it says. It's like, there are some people who are just so distinctive that you can spot them a mile away. And he is 100% one of those. Like,
oh, absolutely.
You can spot everything that he does. And
Both on a practical level and on a philosophical level. Like, his life philosophy is very coherent. Humans are evil and horrible and disgusting little creatures who deserve to die in big explosions. Like, that is a through line through everything he makes. Yeah.
No, I just, it hadn't occurred to me to join that dot, but I think that's fascinating. I think you could do a really interesting parallel analysis of, like, I don't know, Jupiter Ascending with something like Pain and Gain, where Michael Bay decides to do, like, what if I just do a movie about how stupid and cynical and nasty humans are with no explosions to distract you from just how bad everyone is.
God, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's super true. And I think it's interesting because I feel like Michael Bay, in a lot of ways, like, his stories, I feel like, are auteur because it shows, like, what he's interested in, what he believes. Like, it's very much like he doesn't, like, narrative for him is always kind of this, like, secondary thing. Like, it's very much about kind of, like, these, like, tableaus. Whereas for the Wachowskis, you know, the story is everything. The script is everything. And, like, everything kind of emerges from this story they've made, and that they've kind of, like, you know, like, they were scriptwriters first. And I feel like that really shows. Whereas, like, Michael Bay he got to start in advertising. Like, he was an advertising maker first, and, like, then he kind of got into film, but he never, like, let go of the advertising mindset. I kind of feel like wherever you start is kind of like where you end up looking at everything through that perspective, like, no matter what.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And actually the script, that's an interesting point, because if you looked at a different set of Wachowski movies, like if you look at The Matrix, that first Matrix movie got Keanu Reeves an somewhat undeserved reputation for being essentially like a hunk of carved solid something rather than an actor. And that's kind of because he's given that position, because they really want to just, like, tell you all of this cool stuff, and they're not super interested in what this person is like.
Yeah. Keanu Reeves is so much just a vehicle for this world and for these almost like a vehicle for metaphors. Like, it's like he's not so much a person as he is, like, a object that you can apply metaphors to. And I kind of feel that way about Jupiter Ascending too. Like, we haven't talked. I don't remember the main character's name, right? I don't remember her name.
Isn't she actually called Jupiter? Like, isn't that her first name?
Oh, yes, that is her name. She is named Jupiter. You're right. That's right. But, like, I feel like she herself is not a person in the sense that she doesn't have an emotional arc beyond, like, you know, I don't know, like, growing to be less scared of spaceships. But, like, really what she is she's like a vessel for this power fantasy, right? Like, everyone is, or like everyone's like, they exist so that the Wachowskis can show off their cool world and their cool metaphors and their cool narrative, but they don't actually grow as people, or they don't have interior lives. They're just kind of like, you know, like even moments like it's implied that Channing Tatum lost his authority because, like, he lost his rank as a policeman, basically, because he mauled Eddie Redmayne. It's implied because Eddie Redmayne is said to have been mauled by, like, a wolf man, and Channing Tatum was, like, said to have mauled a noble. It's all implied, but there's no, like, connecting that in the movie. Like, the two characters have no kind of, like, recognition or engagement with each other. And if you wanted that to be true, like, if it was true that there was this, like, ancient tension between these two characters, like, I feel like if the movie was about, like, the inner lives of these characters, it would show that in some way. But instead, it's much more interested in showing, you know, like, the gas mines of Jupiter or whatever, you know, like.
Yeah, no, I think that is exactly where it is at. Well, look, thank you very much for coming on the show, Jay. We are very close to time, and there are two things I like to do by way of finishing off an episode. The first one is, like, if people have enjoyed this conversation, they like the idea of Jupiter Ascending but maybe don't want to subject themselves to that particular movie, or they've watched it and similarly they love it because it is, for all that it's trash, like, all of the ways in which it is bad are entertaining ways, and you will have a really good time with this movie. You will not be bored. You will not be sad. You will be cackling like a maniac every time it does something dumb. And you will be genuinely enjoying what it has to say the few moments when it says it competently. Are there other things that you would also recommend? Like, are there other related things that fit in similar categories?
Kind of on like a little scale there's 3 movies that I watched like all in the same kind of little span of my life. So in my head, they're kind of like a bizarre trilogy, but Jupiter Ascending, Pacific Rim, and Mad Max Fury Road in kind of ascending order of quality. If you want a movie that kind of is the same, very imaginative, gorgeous, action-packed explosions and like that sort of thing as Jupiter Ascending, but like maybe it has a little bit more interiority, but like it's still dumb and goofy and big. Pacific Rim is a really great movie for that. Watch it with friends specifically. Watch it like with your buds so you can all hang out and like cheer when the action music plays. Like it's meant to be watched like, as a group. And then, or like watch it over Zoom or what have you. And then Mad Max Fury Road, I do genuinely think is a masterpiece of cinema. I think it is one of the most imaginative, daring, and thematically good and narratively good movies to emerge in like the past easily 10 years. If you want something that is a imaginative, beautiful, like gorgeously shot, gorgeously, edited and produced movie that like hits those action beats and like has that kind of really solid leftist philosophy embedded in it, but like also is good and has like deep engaging characters with like interior lives you really get invested in. Mad Max Fury Road all the way. I've seen it 15 times, 3 times in a drive-in. It's really a good movie.
Excellent. Those are all like normally I chip in some recommendations of my own here, but I actually can't think of anything to top those. They're all great. I have seen Pacific Rim, and like it's like, what if Evangelion was not a bummer? It's great. It's really cool. Mad Max Fury Road, as you say, it's like, let us get everything that was ever good about Mad Max and boil Mad Max down to just those things, including realizing that Mad Max himself is like, he's not necessarily very interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, not to make this about Mad Max, but very quick, I love how Max in Mad Max Fury Road becomes a viewpoint narrator. Like he's not the main character. He is kind of the vessel. Like he's like a Shakespearean narrator, where like he's commenting on the events and he's observing the events. But like we all know it's not his story, and he's so much more interesting as a viewpoint character to like witness other people's struggles. And Tom Hardy is just a truly incredible actor. Like even through all that, even though Mad Max is probably the least developed character in Mad Max Fury Road, you still care about him. You still care deeply about him. It's a really good movie.
No, it's great. What they did is they kind of got the a man rides into town thing from Westerns and Kurosawa movies, and then made him really not the point of the story, but kind of the inciting incident and a useful viewpoint character, as you say. It's great.
Yeah.
So last thing I like to do is plug your shit. Like what have you got that people can find or read or listen to or buy? What have you got to plug?
So I'm a writer of tabletop role-playing games, which are, if you're not familiar, kind of like I write kind of like what if you kind of started, like what if you made the sort of stuff that Dungeons and Dragons is, both no math and very gay and like very kind of, just like, I don't know. I'm proud of what we make. I'm a publisher at Possum Creek Games. You can check out our stuff at possumcreekgames.com. And you can also check me out on Twitter at jdragsky. If you search up J Dragon, my name's J Dragon. That's my actual last name. There is no one else out there. You will find me. I promise you. It's like I will not be hard to find. But also, if you can find me at jdragsky on Twitter. Yeah, you can check out my games. Our newest release is Wanderhome, which if you like Jupiter Ascending, Wanderhome is probably not in any way directly tied to that, but it is a pastoral fantasy RPG about traveling animals moving through a post-war world, very much inspired by Brian Jacques, inspired by Miyazaki, inspired by, like, philosophically a lot of the work of Tove Jansson. It's very cool. We have a great team of folks. And yeah, that's kind of my whole deal.
Excellent. I mean, you know, if you get Jacques, Studio Ghibli, and Tove Jansson together, I am there. So that sounds really good. Well, thank you once again for coming and talking, Jay. This has been a lot of fun.
It's been a delight. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Reserved Recommendations, a radio show and podcast from Manawatu People's Radio, Te Reo Irirangi o ngā tangata o Manawatu. The show was produced and presented by me, Hugh Dingwall, and I also composed our theme music. It's called Sack Jazz, and you can find it at wolfboy.bandcamp.com. If you enjoyed this show, why not go ahead and share it with a friend? You can find the last 10 episodes at npr.nz/show/reserved, or wherever else you get your podcasts. If you want an episode older than that, try searching for Reserved Recommendations on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at Objective Realty, or you can follow the show on Facebook. And finally, Manawatu People's Radio is a non-profit community access station. If you like this or any other piece of their fine audio programming, why not fling them $1 or $2? You can go to npr.nz/donate for more information on how to do that.